Now, just about any website that you go to, you're going to find images. You're going to see images. You can find images that could be located in the files for that website. They could be located somewhere else on the internet somewhere. But you're going to see images showed on that website. And what would a website be without images? So how do you add them? And that's what we're going to go through in this chapter here. So when you add images to a website, there are two things that you need. First of all, you need to tell the browser where to get the image. Where can the image be found? And that's typically called the source of the image. What's the source? Where can I find that image? That's what you need to tell the browser. And you also need to use the IMG element. As you might expect, it's very intuitive when it comes to HTML. A lot of the elements, the way you spell them, the way you write them out, they're very intuitive. So this IMG element, you will notice, is just like this. There's no closing tag of it, part of it. There's no closing part of it. It's just this IMG element. And in order to do this, you need to do these two things. You use the IMG element and you add something else called attributes. And you're going to see a lot about attributes, and you're probably going to use these quite a bit as you write more and more HTML. You'll find this in programming and in general when you're using instructions with computers. You need to sometimes give more information than the initial command tells you to do. So for this, you need to tell the browser where to find it. And that source is the src attribute, and that's the file name for the file. So you're telling that browser what file to use and where that file is located. And by default, you're giving them information that you may not see just yet. And then you have the alt attribute. And this stands for an alternative description that you would give the browser in case for some reason someone couldn't display the image on their screen for some reason. Maybe they're using a screen reader or the image doesn't properly load. That's why you have this alt attribute. Sometimes people may be visually impaired and they're using a screen reader as well, so this becomes important to use. So let's say I had this image right here, and the title of this image was Fort McHenry Cannon.jpg. Well, I would write this in order to show this on my website in this way. I would do the IMG element, have the source equals Fort McHenry.jpg right there, and I put it in between the quotation marks. And then I would have alt and an alternate description in order to be able to display this on my web page. Now, when it comes to images, however, location matters. And the reason why I could display that by writing it just like this simple description here, is because this Fort McHenry image is at the same level in my folder, my main folder, as my index.html page that I want to display it on. So it's at the exact same level. So if I want to display it, all I have to do is just say Fort McHenry Cannon.jpg, give the name of it, and it will display it. But what if it was on a different level? Let's say I have this images folder, which is typically what you do a lot of times, is add your images inside a separate folder to keep everything organized. And let's say I want to display one of these images. So let's say I want to display the Frederick Douglass image right here, the Frederick Douglass .jpg. In order to do that, because it's at a different level than the index.html page that I want to display it on, it's inside the images folder. All I need to do is to have the Frederick Douglass.jpg file name, but before doing it, put the word images, because that's the name of the folder, then slash, and then the file name where to find it. And then go ahead and put the alternative description like we typically would do as we just discussed. So when that makes sense, you really do have to think about how you're managing your files in general when it comes to images. And this is a good practice to do because you're going to do this with other types of files that you're going to use for your website. Styling files with CSS, you'll probably keep in a different folder. JavaScript files, which we'll learn about later on, we'll probably keep in a different folder. There are a number of different types of files that you may keep in a different folder, and it's good to have it organized in that way. And so not only does location matters within the folder, a lot of times I mentioned sometimes you might have an image that's on the internet, it's stored somewhere on the internet. How do you show that, if you will? First, you have to make sure you have the proper rights to do it, but how do you show that? In order to do it, you use the same type of format. You use the IMG element, but what you would actually do is you'd put the link right here. Instead of the source, instead of the file name, you would link. And typically, when you go to a web page, if you have something stored on a web page, you could right-click on the image and then be able to put that in the source attribute here. And that's called a value. That value in that source attribute is what will be showing up. It'll tell the browser where to go to find that particular page or that particular picture, if you will. So we're going to get a feel for how this all works, but you can actually use images that are located on the internet. You can also use images that are in your files, and you can use images that you've stored in other folders within your folder in order to be able to display that on the internet and on your website. And we're going to see that in just a minute.